We are here at the HRDC summit, the second and last day. I have here Mr. Bekin Chalinchali, the Deputy Chairperson of the HRD Council, as well as the General Secretary of COSATU. Mr. Chalinchali, what are the human resource development challenges that are facing South Africa at the moment?
I think there are many. It ranges from whether we're able to produce the right skills for the new jobs that is emerging, but also it's a question of the demand side, whether the industries is able to absorb the people that we produce. Thirdly is the question of whether the university or the institutions knows what the economy wants. In other words, don't they just produce graduates that will have no future in the workplace? So that has been the biggest challenges now, what we term the lack of the labor market intelligences. In other words, whether the employers comes to the university and the institution and says in 10 years' time, this is the kind of skills that we want to have, and therefore assist in producing this kind of people that we need. The question of lack of information for the young people in terms of the choices that they make, the lack of resources in terms of whether people that want to go and take their studies further are able to deal with those issues. But I think we're making progress in our view, because most of the challenges, we've put them through a processes which it identified what are the challenges, in other words, what's the problem, what are the bottlenecks, what is the way forward to deal with those issues. And once it's been done, it's given to a particular ministry to run with it. The challenges we have, though, is that those ministers, because the council have no authority over the people, they don't report back to the council. They're not forced to report back to the council. They have to report to the president in terms of their agreement, performance agreement, and etc. So that is one of the gaps. And we normally, when we come to summit like this, we got some kind of repetition by people, because we're unable to tell them of the road traveled, so that we can get new ideas to implement new strategies. So those are the few kind of challenges in the human resource and development of our country in a broader terms, as to what are the skills shortages, what are the required skill, and etc. etc.
You've made very interesting points around whether or not the council is able to follow up on implementation. That brings us to the next question. How different is this third summit from the other two that we have already had? And are you confident that going forward, perhaps we could have new strategies of ensuring that we implement and monitor the recommendations of this summit?
I think what is nice in the conclusion of this summit was the warning and the taken given by the minister, that we have heard you, we know your recommendation. The starting point from the next meeting is to give a feedback. In other words, they have to say what are the recommendations, who should be implementing this. So the higher education is the hosting government department of these issues and providing secretariat. They have to go to each recommendation and it says you must not work in isolation, for an example. Who should then ensure that government are coordinated? It might be the deputy president himself. So they needed to identify the problem. If there's a lack of resources in the higher education or in the colleges, then it's become the responsibility of the higher education and training. So in the next meeting, we hope to get a report before we start addressing other problems. What happened to this recommendation? What has been done in the last 12 months before we engage to the next one? I think that's a difference that comes quite clearly, that we can't just be debating a forum. We need to operationalize our program. They must be measurable, they must be evaluated. Where there's a lack of development, people has to be accountable one way or another.
On a principle of together we can do more, what is organized labor going to bring to the table? Because you are a critical stakeholder when it comes to human resource development.
Very likely in terms of in providing resources. The resources that we have as a labor collectively is the money that is in the UIF, for an example. If there are reserves in the UIF that we may not need the money urgently, can we utilize that money and bring it back to the skills in terms of looking to the young people as our own. In other words, it's not a money that you are just giving to somebody, but you are giving indirectly to your own child who might not have been able to take his or her career forward. You look to the number of sitters, which is mainly the money that is contributed in the name of the workers. So the workers can use that money as one hand. But they can also use their own investment. They are not that much, but they can say it will make money available. In other words, you invest in social responsibility where you don't just invest in terms of the market, the speculative market. So we can do that one. But we can also play a role in relations to making the young people know what are the career that will work. In other words, can the labor movement come out and say, in the industries, we know the shortage of skill is in this direction. We're not all going to be going to the university. The most important for the industrial unions, for an example, is to get the artisan and etc. Can we make and calculate that kind of thinking to our own children, that we don't need to wear a suit and a tie to be able to do the job? Sometimes you have to wear some overalls. But some of the jobs with the overall, which we regard as sometimes as dirty job because you work with oil and etc., are the most paying jobs for people. So we need to be able to engage. In terms of creating space for internship, there's a big role that a trade union can play. Not just we close up and say, no, we don't want young people to come here, we're fearing they're going to take their jobs. But to be part and parcel of the processes and say, if the company want to get new interns to be able to be trained, we're interested that they come up in here. But we don't want them to be recycled, that you train them, then you throw them to the streets. We want the company to have a plan that these people will be absorbed somewhere else. In other words, they need to be involved. So in that context, I think we think the labor movement as a whole got a huge opportunity to play.
Thank you very much for your precious time and this insightful input that you've just made.
Thank you very much.
That was Mr. Begin Chalinchali, the Deputy Chairperson of Council and General Secretary of COSATU. How do we speak? Okay.
That's the diversity of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. We are here at the HRDC summit. This is the second day and of course the last day. We have Mr. Vusi Kwane from Sasol as one of the partners of the HRD. Mr. Kwane, as Sasol, we know that you do train people, offer them skills, particularly our youth. In terms of breaking or reversing the challenges that are being introduced by the Fourth Industrial Revolution, what is your part in this regard?
Well, firstly, I think the challenges of the Industrial Revolution is basically saying we need to learn to do things differently and perhaps unlearn the old ways. So I think we will have to even look at our approach to skilling young people as we give them various opportunities in various institutions, because the young people that we will require are the people that will be very innovative. As you know, business requires innovation. So it's going to be important that we influence the content of what they learn. We influence the how they do that so that they can be ready. If we are, as a business, to stay competitive, going forward, we are going to achieve that through the investment in people, and there's no better way than to do that through our young people.
Most companies complain that the quality of throughput from our colleges, sometimes universities, is not exactly the quality they want. Some of the skills are not commensurate to the requirements of industry. Do you as Sasol encounter such challenges, and how do you deal with them? And do you think you can have a role in correcting that?
Indeed, we encounter those challenges. That was actually one of the reasons why, amongst others, we are working with two TVET colleges, one in Sasolburg and one in Secunda, because we believe we can play a role in terms of influencing the learning at these institutions. But most important for the relevance of the skills, if, for example, the theoretical curriculum that they follow is actually shaped in such a way that it is relevant for what that curriculum is going to want to achieve, then we are doing the right thing. So in this partnership, basically, we are introducing elements of the practical so that children are able to relate what is it that they learn in theory. And also we are giving them exposure to simulations where they simulate the world of work and premised by the theories that they have in fact learned before. So yes, indeed, we are not just watching that there are those gaps, but we are doing something about it. And so far, we're very encouraged by the partnerships that have been forged.
Over time, we complain about having summits, conferences, with an aim of implementing the resolutions and recommendations. From this summit, which things do you think will be a low-hanging fruits for us to take forward, implement easily, and be able to monitor easily?
I happened to be in a commission that was talking about partnerships, and part of the value that I extracted from the conversations is the fact that quite a lot of different stakeholders are actually doing very, very good things, but they don't necessarily know. So just sharing and communicating with each other, as I think it was said even by the minister during closing, it is actually very, very important. The low-hanging fruit is that the best practice that is there is actually shared. And there were lots of very good principles, for example, to say if you are to make a successful partnership, what would be the underlying principles? And when the different stakeholders shared, there was a lot of commonality. So people getting together, people communicating, and people engaging beyond here will actually ensure that we realize that which we spoke about.
Thank you very much. As your parting shot, what would you say to delegates going home from here?
I think we have a big responsibility to ensure that the future of our children is actually shaped the way that it should be. We have a big role to play, and for me it was heartening to see the delegates dedicating the 2 days to actually looking at what is underlying the skills challenges of our country. I'm really hoping that we didn't just learn from the deliberations, whether it was at plenary or through the commissions, that we actually take the conclusions of the summit seriously by actually going to act about them when we leave.
Thank you very much for your time and insightful input. We hope to meet again in similar environments.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Vusi Kwane from Sasol.